His granddaughter called him from a police station, crying that she had been arrested for murder. But as her grandfather searched for the truth, he uncovered a conspiracy involving forged evidence, powerful corruption, and a respected attorney willing to destroy anyone who stood in his way. Stay until the end, because every twist changes everything. If you enjoy emotional mystery stories with shocking reveals, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. The phone rang at exactly 8:37 on a Tuesday morning, only minutes after I had finished watering the small garden behind my house. Rain tapped steadily against the kitchen window while the old coffee maker hissed beside me. Nothing about that morning suggested my life was about to split into a before and an after. I remember glancing at the caller ID and smiling when I saw my granddaughter's name. Ilara rarely called during weekdays because she was usually busy with her graduate classes. I assumed she wanted advice about replacing the aging tires on her little hatchback, or perhaps she simply wanted to hear my voice. I answered without hesitation. "Grandpa." Her voice barely sounded human. Every word broke beneath heavy sobs. "Please, please don't hang up." My heart lurched. "Ilara? What's wrong? Are you hurt?" I'm at the police station." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. I could hear distant voices, the clatter of metal doors, and someone giving instructions somewhere in the background. Then she whispered words I will never forget. "They think I had something to do with a murder." The sentence froze every thought inside my head. Before I could ask another question, another voice interrupted. "Mr. Frederick Volmark?" The tone was calm, practiced, and completely emotionless. "This is Detective Nolan Pierce with the Ashmore Central Police Department. Your granddaughter has been detained for questioning regarding an ongoing homicide investigation. We advise you not to discuss the case over the phone. If you wish to see her, report to the station immediately." The line went dead. I stood motionless in my kitchen with the phone still pressed against my ear long after the call ended. Outside, the rain continued falling as though nothing had happened. Inside, every memory I had of Ilara rushed through my mind. She was the little girl who cried after accidentally stepping on a butterfly. She volunteered at the public library every Saturday. She baked birthday cakes for neighbors who had no family. Murder was a word that simply did not belong beside her name. I grabbed my coat, my car keys, and left without finishing my coffee. The drive into Ashmore took nearly 40 minutes because of the weather. Traffic crawled through soaked intersections while windshield wipers pushed away endless sheets of rain. Every red light felt like punishment. I replayed the phone call over and over, hoping I had misunderstood something. Perhaps she had witnessed a crime. Perhaps she had been nearby when it happened. There had to be another explanation. When I finally reached the police station, the parking lot was unusually crowded. News vans lined the street across the building, their satellite dishes pointed toward the gray sky. Reporters stood beneath umbrellas speaking into cameras. The moment I stepped from my car, several turned toward me. "Sir, are you related to the suspect? Do you believe your granddaughter is innocent? Can you comment on the victim?" I ignored every question and hurried through the front entrance. Inside, the atmosphere felt colder than the rain outside. Officers moved briskly between hallways carrying folders and evidence boxes. Phones rang constantly. A television mounted in the waiting area displayed breaking news about an unidentified man found dead inside an abandoned warehouse on the industrial edge of town. The victim's face had not been released, but police confirmed they had already detained one person connected to the investigation. That person was my granddaughter. A uniformed receptionist asked for my identification before directing me toward an interview room. I expected to see Ilara immediately, but instead Detective Nolan Pierce entered alone carrying a thick case file. He appeared to be in his early 40s with neatly combed dark hair and the tired expression of someone who had spent too many years looking at humanity's worst moments. "Mr. Volmark," he said, taking a seat across from me. "Thank you for coming. I want to see my granddaughter." "Not yet." His answer came so quickly that it sounded rehearsed. "I have a few questions first." I don't care about your questions. I want to know why she's here. Without responding, he opened the folder and slid several photographs across the metal table. The first showed Alara standing outside a weathered brick warehouse sometime after sunset. The second showed her arguing with a man whose face was partially turned away from the camera. The third captured her carrying a worn leather document folder while looking nervously over her shoulder. If you recognize any of these locations, Detective Pierce said, this would be an excellent time to tell us. I studied each photograph carefully. Years before retirement, I had spent decades inspecting bridges, schools, municipal buildings, and construction sites. My job demanded attention to details most people overlooked. Tiny cracks in concrete. Slight changes in load-bearing supports. The smallest inconsistency could mean the difference between safety and catastrophe. Those habits never disappeared. Something immediately bothered me. I picked up the first two photographs and placed them side by side. The detective watched silently. The timestamps say these were taken 4 minutes apart, I said. That's correct. They weren't. His expression changed ever so slightly. The shadows don't match. In one photograph the light source falls from the east. 4 minutes later it suddenly falls from the south. That's impossible unless someone moved industrial floodlights or altered the images. For the first time since entering the room, Detective Pierce stopped looking confident. He quietly gathered the photographs back into the folder without offering an explanation. That was the moment I realized this investigation contained far more than a frightened college student and a dead stranger. Someone wanted these pictures to tell a story. And someone desperately hoped nobody would look closely enough to question it. I left the interview room with more questions than answers. Detective Nolan Pierce still refused to let me see Alara, claiming the investigation was in its earliest stages and that outside contact could interfere with questioning. His explanation sounded reasonable, yet something in his manner kept bothering me. Every answer he gave felt carefully measured, as though he were reading from a script instead of responding to a worried grandfather. Before I reached the front entrance, a young records clerk hurried past carrying a stack of case files. As she passed me, she lowered her voice without slowing her pace. Mr. Vollmark. I turned toward her. If you love your granddaughter, don't stop asking questions. Before I could respond, she disappeared through a secured door that required a keycard. I stood frozen for several seconds, replaying her warning. It was not the kind of thing someone casually whispered inside a police station. Someone inside the department knew something was wrong. The rain had finally stopped when I stepped outside. Television reporters were still waiting near the sidewalk, hoping to capture reactions from anyone connected to the case. I avoided them by leaving through the employee parking lot, where I could think without cameras following every step. I sat inside my car for nearly 10 minutes before starting the engine. One fact continued echoing inside my mind. The photographs. Those impossible shadows were not an accident. Someone had either manipulated the images or intentionally mixed photographs taken at different times to create a false timeline. If they were willing to do that, what else inside the investigation had been altered? Instead of driving home, I headed toward Alara's apartment on the east side of Ashmore. I still had the spare key she had given me 2 years earlier in case of emergencies. At the time she joked that I was more reliable than any locksmith. I never imagined I would use it under circumstances like these. The apartment looked untouched. Her coffee mug still rested beside the sink. A half-finished crossword puzzle lay open on the dining table. Her favorite blue sweater hung neatly over the back of a chair. There were no signs of forced entry or a hurried search. Whoever had arrested her either had no warrant to examine the apartment or had deliberately left everything exactly as it was. I began looking carefully through every room. Not because I expected to find evidence of a crime. Because I wanted to understand what had frightened her so badly. After nearly half an hour, I noticed something unusual inside the living room bookshelf. The shelves held novels, university textbooks, family photographs, and travel guides. But one section caught my attention. A thin layer of dust covered the entire shelf except for one perfectly clean rectangle about 12 inches wide. Something had rested there for months before being removed very recently. The outline matched the size of a document binder. I searched nearby cabinets, closets, and drawers without finding it. Whatever had occupied that empty space was now gone. As I stood wondering where it had disappeared, someone knocked on the apartment door. 3 slow knocks. Not aggressive. Not hesitant. Carefully timed. I opened the door expecting a police officer. Instead, an elderly delivery driver stood there holding a plain brown envelope. Package for Frederick Vollmark. I wasn't expecting anything. No signature required. He handed it over, tipped his cap politely, and walked away before I could ask another question. I watched him leave through the hallway window. His delivery van carried no company logo. Within seconds it disappeared around the corner. Back inside, I examined the envelope. No return address. No postage. No handwriting. Only my name printed neatly across the front. Inside was a small brass storage locker key attached to a faded plastic tag. Stamped into the tag were 3 numbers. 214. Nothing else. No letter. No instructions. No explanation. Most people would have called the police. Under different circumstances, perhaps I would have done the same. But after everything I had seen that morning, trusting the investigation no longer felt wise. The storage facility sat beside the old freight rail yard on the northern edge of town. It was nearly sunset by the time I arrived. Long rows of orange metal doors stretched across the property while security lights flickered to life overhead. The office clerk barely looked up from his newspaper after confirming the locker number. "You're here for 214? I nodded. He slid a visitor log toward me. "Sign in." His expression suggested people collected forgotten belongings there every day. Nothing about his behavior hinted that locker 214 contained anything unusual. Yet my instincts told me otherwise. The narrow hallway echoed beneath my footsteps as I counted each numbered door. 210, 211, 212, 213. Finally, I stopped in front of 214. The brass key fit perfectly. For a brief moment, I considered walking away. Whatever waited inside had already placed my granddaughter behind bars. Opening that door might pull me into the same danger. I took one slow breath, turned the key, and lifted the metal door. What I saw inside immediately erased every remaining doubt that Alara had been protecting something far more valuable than anyone realized. The storage locker was almost empty. No furniture. No boxes stacked against the walls. No forgotten personal belongings. Only a single metal table stood beneath a flickering fluorescent light. Resting in the center of that table was the same weathered leather document folder I had seen in the photographs Detective Pierce showed me earlier that day. Seeing it in person made my pulse quicken. Whatever this folder contained had become the reason my granddaughter was sitting inside an interrogation room instead of attending her university classes. I stepped inside and lowered the metal door behind me. The lock clicked into place. For the first time all day, complete silence surrounded me. I opened the folder carefully. The first pages looked ordinary enough. They were engineering inspection reports, structural certifications, and maintenance approvals for bridges, schools, hospitals, and municipal buildings throughout the state. Every document carried official seals and signatures. At first glance they appeared completely legitimate. Then I recognized one signature. Harold Brennick. I stared at the page for several seconds before checking another report. The same signature appeared again. Then another. And another. That was impossible. Harold Brennick had been one of the finest structural engineers I had ever worked with. 20 years earlier, I had personally supervised his certification program. 8 years ago, I attended his funeral after he lost a long battle with cancer. I remembered helping carry his casket. Yet here was his signature approving bridge inspections completed only 9 months ago. A dead man had somehow certified public infrastructure. I continued, turning pages. More names surfaced. Margaret Hensley, Owen Darcott, Louise Fenner. Every one of them had died years earlier. Someone was using the identities of deceased engineers to approve projects that should never have received authorization. The deeper I looked, the darker the pattern became. Entire inspection reports had been copied, modified, and reassigned to different construction sites. Load calculations did not match the structures they supposedly evaluated. Safety recommendations had disappeared from final versions while approval stamps remained intact. Millions of dollars worth of public projects had been certified using fraudulent documentation. My years as an engineer allowed me to recognize these inconsistencies within minutes. Someone without technical experience might never have noticed them. I photographed every page with my phone before returning the documents to their original order. If anything happened to the folder, at least a digital copy would survive. As I prepared to leave, a folded sheet slipped from the back cover and landed on the concrete floor. It was not an engineering report. It was a handwritten list of names. Some belonged to construction executives. Others belonged to city officials. One name appeared 3 separate times, each circled in black ink. Sorrel Vane Ashcombe. The name sounded familiar, though I could not immediately remember why. I searched my memory while locking the storage unit behind me. Then it came back. Sorrel Ashcombe. The celebrated defense attorney whose face regularly appeared on television after winning impossible court cases. Newspapers praised him as one of the sharpest legal minds in the state. Politicians sought his advice. Business leaders hired him whenever major lawsuits threatened their companies. Why would a famous attorney appear repeatedly inside evidence connected to fraudulent engineering reports? The question followed me all the way home. Darkness had settled over Ashmore by the time I pulled into my driveway. I had barely stepped inside when headlights swept across my living room window. A dark sedan stopped outside the house. 2 men stepped out. Neither wore a police uniform. Both wore tailored suits. One remained near the car while the other walked calmly to my front door. 3 polite knocks echoed through the hallway. I opened the door only halfway. The visitor smiled. Mr. Frederick Vollmark? Yes. My employer understands you've recently come into possession of certain documents. I don't know what you're talking about. His smile never faded. I think you do. He removed a business card from his jacket pocket and held it between 2 fingers. There was no company logo. No address. Only a phone number printed beneath one name. Sorrel Vane Ashcombe. If you contact this number tonight, the man said softly, everyone involved can avoid unnecessary complications. And if I don't? His expression finally changed. The friendliness disappeared. My employer believes families should remain together. He let those words hang in the air before turning away. Neither man looked back as they entered the sedan and drove into the darkness. I locked every door in the house. The folder was no longer just evidence. Someone powerful already knew I had it. Less than 5 minutes later my cell phone vibrated. The caller ID displayed an unfamiliar number. When I answered, nobody spoke. I heard only slow breathing. Then, just before the call disconnected, a calm voice whispered one sentence. You should have left locker 214 unopened. I did not sleep that night. Every unfamiliar sound outside my house forced me awake. Headlights passing through the street reflected across my bedroom ceiling, making me wonder whether another visitor had come to convince me to surrender the folder. By sunrise, I had already decided on one thing. Keeping the evidence hidden inside my home was no longer safe. Whoever had located locker 214 could eventually find my house as well. I placed the leather folder inside an old metal toolbox that had belonged to my late wife. Beneath it, I hid the digital copies on 2 encrypted flash drives. One stayed in my jacket pocket. The other I taped beneath the spare tire inside my car. If someone found one copy, another would survive. At exactly 9 o'clock my doorbell rang again. This time I looked through the window before opening it. Standing outside was a woman in her late 60s wearing a dark green raincoat despite the clear morning sky. Her silver hair was tied neatly behind her head, and she carried a worn leather satchel beneath one arm. It took me only a moment to recognize her. "Morel." She smiled faintly. "I was hoping you still remembered me." Professor Morel Caiston had worked beside me more than 25 years earlier during statewide infrastructure audits. She possessed one of the sharpest analytical minds I had ever encountered. If she came to my house unannounced after decades of silence, it was because something serious had happened. The moment she stepped inside, she locked the front door herself. "Don't answer any unknown calls," she said quietly. "And don't trust anyone who suddenly offers to help." I stared at her. "You know about Ilara." "I know much more than that." She opened her satchel and removed several newspaper clippings, engineering reports, and a small digital voice recorder. "You aren't holding ordinary inspection files, Frederick. I've already figured that out." "No," she replied. "You haven't." She spread the papers across my dining table. One by one she explained how a hidden network had operated for nearly 15 years. Construction companies bribed local officials to approve projects that failed mandatory safety inspections. Rather than correcting dangerous flaws, they simply replaced genuine engineering reports with expertly forged versions. Dead engineers were the perfect cover because no one expected them to dispute signatures placed on official documents. "The money involved," she continued. "Hundreds of millions." I felt my stomach tighten. "And Ilara?" Morel looked directly into my eyes. "She was never their target." That answer surprised me. "What do you mean?" "The murdered man was." She handed me a photograph of a middle-aged investigator standing beside stacks of archive boxes. His name was Adrian Kessler. He spent 3 years collecting evidence against everyone involved. He knew someone inside law enforcement was leaking information, so he trusted almost no one. 3 nights ago he arranged to meet your granddaughter because she volunteered at the university archives where he had been conducting research. I frowned. "Why Ilara?" "Because she happened to be the last honest person available when he realized he was being followed." According to Morel, Adrian had given Ilara the leather folder only minutes before entering the abandoned warehouse where he believed another whistleblower was waiting. Instead, he walked directly into an ambush. By the time police arrived, Adrian was dead, the killers had disappeared, and Ilara unknowingly possessed the evidence they had failed to recover. Everything suddenly fit together. The rushed arrest, the manipulated photographs, the pressure to surrender the folder. None of it had been about solving Adrian's murder. It had been about finding the missing evidence before anyone understood its value. Morel pushed the digital recorder toward me. "He anticipated this." "You mean Adrian?" She nodded. "He believed he might not survive long enough to expose them. So he recorded one private meeting." My hands hesitated before pressing the play button. Static crackled for several seconds. Then 2 voices became clear. The first belonged to Adrian. The second was calm, confident, and unmistakably familiar. I had heard that voice countless times on televised legal interviews. Sorrel Vane Ashcombe. The famous attorney spoke without urgency, as though discussing routine business. "Original inspection files create unnecessary risks," he said. "They disappear, replacements are filed, and everyone continues benefiting. That is how stability is maintained." Adrian answered sharply. "People could die if those structures fail." Sorrel laughed softly. "Then make sure they don't fail." Silence followed. Then came the sentence that made my blood run cold. "And find the young woman carrying the folder before anyone else does." The recording ended. Neither of us spoke for several moments. Finally Morel broke the silence. They framed the wrong person. Before I could answer, a loud crash shattered the front window of my living room. Glass exploded across the floor. Something heavy rolled across the carpet and stopped beneath the coffee table. It was a brick wrapped with a single sheet of paper. I unfolded the note with trembling hands. It contained only 6 words. "You are running out of time, Frederick." The brick had barely stopped rolling across my living room floor when Morel pulled me away from the shattered window. "Don't stand where they can see you," she said. Her voice remained steady, but I noticed the tension in her hands as she closed the curtains and switched off every light facing the street. Whoever had thrown the brick wanted more than to frighten me. They wanted me to understand that they knew exactly where I lived. I unfolded the note again. "You are running out of time, Frederick." No signature. No fingerprints that I could see. Just 6 carefully typed words. Morel slipped the note into a plastic evidence sleeve from her satchel. "They're getting desperate," she whispered. "That's good." I looked at her in disbelief. "Someone just attacked my house." Exactly. Powerful people only panic when they believe they're losing control. She was right. If Sorrel Ashcombe truly believed he could recover the folder quietly, there would have been no reason for intimidation. The threat meant the evidence had become more dangerous than they expected. We decided not to remain in the house another minute. I gathered the leather folder, both flash drives, and Adrian Kessler's voice recorder while Morel contacted someone she trusted completely. She refused to tell me the person's name until we were safely away from the neighborhood. Less than 20 minutes later we parked behind an aging brick newspaper building in downtown Ashmore. The sign above the entrance read Ashmore Herald. Although most people considered it a struggling local newspaper, Morel explained that its investigative editor had spent years exposing corruption that larger media companies ignored. His name was Graham Ellison. He greeted us inside a cluttered office overflowing with filing cabinets, camera equipment, and stacks of old newspapers. The walls displayed framed front pages covering scandals, political resignations, and criminal convictions dating back decades. Morel introduced us quickly. Graham is one of only 3 journalists Adrian trusted. Without wasting time, I placed the folder on his desk. For nearly an hour Graham examined the documents while comparing them against archived public records stored on his computer. The deeper he searched, the quieter he became. Finally he leaned back in his chair. "This is real." "You sound surprised," I replied. I hoped Adrian was right, but I never imagined the fraud reached this level. He rotated his monitor toward me. Highlighted across the screen were dozens of infrastructure projects completed during the last 15 years. Schools, hospitals, parking garages, apartment complexes. Every one of them listed legal representation from the same law firm, Ashcombe Legal Associates. "It isn't just forged engineering reports," Graham explained. Whenever whistleblowers questioned safety approvals, Sorrell's firm represented the construction companies in court. Every lawsuit disappeared before reaching trial. The pattern was undeniable. Engineering fraud generated enormous profits. Legal manipulation kept victims silent. Corrupt officials approved payments. Each part protected the others. Suddenly Graham's phone rang. He answered, listened for less than 10 seconds, and immediately stood up. "What happened?" Morel asked. "My courthouse source just called." He looked directly at me. "Sorrel Ashcombe requested an emergency injunction this morning." "For what?" "To seize all documents connected to Adrian Kessler's investigation on grounds of national security." I stared at him. National security? It doesn't matter whether the claim is true. If a judge signs the order before this evidence becomes public, every document could disappear into sealed government archives for years. Time had just become our greatest enemy. Graham opened a secure file-sharing program on his computer. I'm not taking chances. One by one he scanned every page from the folder into encrypted digital archives. Then he copied everything onto multiple secure servers located outside the state. Morel handed him Adrian's voice recording. "Upload that too." Within minutes the files existed in several different locations. Destroying the original folder would no longer erase the truth. Just as Graham completed the final upload, his office television interrupted regular programming. A breaking news banner flashed across the screen. Authorities were holding a press conference outside the courthouse. Sorrel Ashcombe stepped confidently before a crowd of reporters. He appeared perfectly composed. "My client has become the victim of a coordinated campaign involving fabricated evidence," he declared. "Certain individuals are attempting to damage innocent reputations by distributing forged engineering records." I felt anger rising inside me. He was lying in front of the entire state. Then one reporter shouted a question that changed everything. "Mr. Ashcombe, how do you explain the audio recording that names you directly?" For the first time since appearing before the cameras, Sorrel stopped speaking. His expression froze. Only for a second. But it was enough. Every camera captured the hesitation. Every microphone recorded the silence. He recovered quickly, denied knowing anything about the recording, and ended the conference without taking another question. Graham smiled for the first time that day. He just made a mistake. What mistake? He reacted before anyone officially released the recording. The room fell silent. None of us had told the media about Adrian's audio file, which meant only one thing. Sorrel already knew exactly what was on it because he had been there when it was recorded. Before anyone could celebrate, Graham's computer emitted a sharp alert. A new message appeared across the screen. "Unknown user attempting remote access." Then another. And another. Someone had begun trying to erase every copy of the evidence. The battle had entered an entirely new stage. The warning messages continued flashing across Graham Ellison's computer screen. "Unknown user attempting remote access. Access denied. Secondary server protected." A third alert appeared only seconds later before disappearing as quickly as it had arrived. Graham remained surprisingly calm. Instead of panicking, he unplugged the computer from the internet and reached for a small external drive stored inside a locked drawer. "They're too late," he said. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I never keep the only copy connected to a network." He held up the drive. "Everything has already been duplicated offline." For the first time in nearly 2 days, I felt a small measure of hope. The evidence had survived. Now it only needed to reach the right people. Within an hour, Graham arranged a meeting with investigators from the State Office of Public Integrity, a division completely separate from the local police department. Adrian Kessler had attempted to contact them before his death, but he had been killed before the meeting could happen. This time the investigators arrived with federal warrants already prepared after reviewing the first batch of encrypted files Graham had transmitted earlier. The lead investigator introduced herself as Director Helena Crow. She listened without interrupting while Morel and I explained everything from Alara's arrest to the threats, the forged engineering reports, and Adrian's final recording. When I finished speaking, Helena asked only one question. "Do you still have the original folder?" I placed it on the conference table. She opened it carefully, examined several signatures, then looked toward one of her forensic specialists. "Authenticate every page immediately." The specialist compared signatures against archived government records, while another technician analyzed Adrian's voice recording. Nearly 2 hours passed before Helena returned. "The recording is authentic." She paused. "So are the documents." Those 4 words changed everything. By late afternoon, simultaneous search warrants were executed across multiple cities. Investigators entered government offices, construction company headquarters, financial institutions, and the downtown offices of Ashcombe Legal Associates. News helicopters filled the sky as television stations switched to continuous live coverage. Meanwhile, I finally received permission to see Alara. She looked exhausted when officers escorted her into the visitation room. Dark circles surrounded her eyes, yet the moment she saw me she rushed forward and wrapped both arms around me. "I was so scared," she whispered. "I know. I thought nobody would believe me. I believed you before I even reached the station." She pulled back, tears filling her eyes again. "I'm sorry you got dragged into this." I smiled gently. "You didn't drag me anywhere. We walked into this together." Less than an hour later, Director Helena Crow entered the room carrying official paperwork. "Miss Elara Volmark," she announced, "all charges against you have been dismissed effective immediately." Elara covered her mouth as tears rolled down her cheeks. She was free. The following morning, the investigation delivered another stunning development. Forensic scientists had recovered microscopic particles of specialized fireproof concrete from the soles of shoes seized inside Sorrel Ashcombe's private office. The material matched an unfinished maintenance tunnel beneath the abandoned warehouse where Adrian Kessler had been murdered. Very few locations in the region used that exact concrete mixture, and investigators confirmed the tunnel had been closed to the public for months before the crime. Combined with Adrian's recording, financial records, forged inspection reports, witness testimony from frightened former employees, and deleted emails recovered from company servers, the evidence became overwhelming. Sorrel Ashcombe was arrested before noon. Television cameras captured him leaving the courthouse in handcuffs, surrounded by officers instead of reporters seeking legal advice. The man once praised as the state's most brilliant attorney refused to answer a single question. His silence spoke louder than any defense he could have offered. The investigation continued for months. Dozens of corrupt officials resigned or faced prosecution. Construction executives admitted to approving dangerous projects in exchange for enormous profits. Emergency inspections were ordered for schools, bridges, hospitals, and apartment buildings whose certifications had been forged. Several structures required immediate repairs before they could safely reopen. Engineers later confirmed that those inspections likely prevented future disasters that could have claimed countless innocent lives. Justice arrived in ways none of us expected. As for me, I returned to the quiet life I thought I had lost forever. Every Sunday Elara visits my house carrying groceries I insist I do not need. She still laughs at my old stories even though she has heard every one of them at least a dozen times. Sometimes we sit on the back porch drinking coffee while watching the evening sky change colors. Neither of us speaks much about those terrible days anymore because we no longer have to. One ordinary phone call nearly destroyed our family. Instead, it exposed years of corruption hidden beneath polished reputations and expensive suits. I learned that truth does not always win quickly. Sometimes it survives because ordinary people refuse to surrender when powerful voices demand silence. If I had ignored my granddaughter's frightened call that rainy Tuesday morning, the real criminals would have buried the evidence forever. Instead, one desperate plea for help became the beginning of justice. Thank you for reading my story from beginning to end. If you enjoyed this emotional mystery and want more stories filled with unexpected twists, hidden secrets, and satisfying endings, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next adventure. I would also love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done if you had received that phone call?